Well, hello there and welcome to part 2 of our chat with the Lincoln City chairman, Clive Nates. He was so good in the first, we thought we'd get him back for a little bit more. Clive, lovely to see you. How did you find part 1, firstly?
Grueling.
Thank you very much. That's the first one-word answer you've given me, thankfully. Clive, we left part 1 at the end of what I classed, I guess, as the Danny and Nicky Cowley era. So let's move on then to Michael Appleton. And Michael's role was head coach. So obviously there is, and remains to this day, a lot of debate in football about what is a head coach and what is a manager. How did you come to the realization or the decision that you were going to hire a head coach moving forward?
I think as we became a bigger club, we had brought more resources into the club. It was felt that a director of football model was best for us. And remember at that time when Michael Appleton joined, Jez was only a consultant. He wasn't full-time. But what we wanted was that the manager would be more focused on the team. He would have support through a director of football that would help with the running of the football department. Obviously, the manager would still work daily with the likes of the medical and sports science side, but there would be somebody to help those people, the backroom staff at the club, that the manager wouldn't have those duties. That would be the responsibility of the director of football. And also to assist on the recruitment side specifically. Because again, the manager or head coach has limited amount of time to go out and watch games, and you would have a director of football who would be mostly responsible for that area.
With regards to the recruitment, now, you're on social media, I'm on social media. I know you're not always active in terms of posting, but I presume that you quite often see, everything really, but that includes comments from fans. How true or untrue is it that it's not just the manager that is responsible for signing players, that members of the board, perhaps, or whether it's Liam, whether it's yourself, play the active role in signing players going forward, and that the head coach has nothing to do with that? Is that just totally unfounded?
Yeah, I mean, some of the times when I look at what is written on various of the social media sites, I think I'm looking at some QAnon conspiracy site, and I don't recognize our club at all. The director of football, as I've said, is there to assist the manager, to allow him to spend more time with the team on the grass. So the director of football would work with the recruitment department and with the manager or head coach to bring in players. No player has ever been brought in that, hasn't been given the thumbs up by the manager or head coach. Absolutely, that has never happened. In fact, and it's something I've actually mentioned on social media on one occasion, is that a couple of times, certainly under Michael Appleton, we brought in a player that didn't come through the recruitment department. One of those is Chris Maguire, who was a player that obviously had played under Michael, and that was totally Michael's desire to bring in Chris.
Is that one of the more difficult things to get right as a chairman, chief executive, senior director on the board, the relationship between the manager and the director of football? Is that one of the most difficult aspects of the all-encompassing role?
Yeah, look, I think it can be. I mean, certainly the head coach reports directly through to Liam. there is a reporting through to Jez as well. But, everybody has to report to somebody. I ultimately report to the fans, and, you've got to manage all those relationships. But, some of the suggestions out there that, even around Conor McGrandles, I've seen comments, well, that must be a Liam and Jez signing. I mean, how could anybody, think that just because he's played for us before, that somehow Michael would not have been involved in that decision? They're actively involved in regular meetings between not only Michael but the rest of the coaching staff with the recruitment staff to agree on players that are targets for us and players that we ultimately sign.
But is that just social media now? Would we have that at every club? Is it that everyone's got a comment and that the rate of someone's comment on social media and the speed in which it can get back to people at the higher echelons of a football club is now just quicker, that this was always going to happen? Or is it something that you've started to see happen more here? And that's not me trying to get to any specific point, really. I'm just trying to unpack what you've said a little bit there.
Yeah, look, I look mostly at social media with regard to Lincoln City, but I do look out of interest at other fan message boards. And there's no doubt that there is this belief out there that when you have a director of football, he makes the decisions as to which player they sign. Maybe in some clubs they might not consult the manager. I don't know. I think that would be a foolish way to do it, to bring in players that a manager or head coach wouldn't want. I think that just defeats the object. I think it is important these days that, to help the manager out, as most clubs do. You do have a director of football and you do have a recruitment department that's specifically out there, allowing the manager to do what he should be doing and doing that part of the work. I think it's also important that in this sort of work as a manager, they don't generally last all that long in a job. So to allow a manager total authority over bringing in whatever player he wants to bring in, I think would be problematic. I mean, let's even look at that example of Chris Maguire. We knew that he would only be effective as long as Michael was here. So why would you let a manager bring in a whole lot of players that only suit him and, wouldn't be good for the club in the longer term once that manager had moved on?
So the podcast timeline at the moment, because as fans may have realised in part one, we're jumping in between the timeline as such and then veering off into other interesting avenues. If I bring it back, Michael Appleton's in charge. It felt almost at the time, and I'm looking at the COVID season, if you like, that Michael had built the perfect team. When you look back on that team that he was able to put together, and I say he, but everyone was able to put together, is that kind of the blueprint of a team that you would like going forward? Because as I look at it, and I was fortunate enough to attend quite a few of the matches during the COVID season with the show and everything that came with that, it had pace, it had a good element of youth and experience with it, it had excitement, it had a bit of power in there as well. Was that the blueprint for what you would like to see of a Lincoln City team going forward?
Well, there were a number of special things that happened that season. Obviously, there was also a salary cap in place. I think the ability to bring in a Brennan Johnson is maybe a one-off. To get anything close to that as a loan signing is near to impossible. A lot of things came together that season that enabled us to be pushing for promotion. It didn't turn out that way, and I still think that that it really was a missed opportunity, that we had the chance, but for, in particular, the home form, it was a season where we could have really got into the top two.
There were suggestions that you can get promoted too early. Now, obviously, I guess we haven't been promoted to the Championship since then, so it's difficult to compare what could have happened. But was that ever in your thinking, that actually this team might be too young to go up, or that Brennan will go back to Forest and, you know, Morgan will go back to, where was Morgan at the time? West Brom?
Man City.
Oh, he was at Man City, of course he was. Yeah, he was at West Brom before, wasn't he? So, you know, did it ever cross your mind that actually, we might not, as a club, as a team, we might not be ready for the Championship? Or when you say it was a missed opportunity, you mean not only was it a missed opportunity to, you know, lift another trophy, but a missed opportunity to build something in the Championship?
Yeah, it would have been challenging because, that team, and maybe even as a club, we weren't ready for the Championship. But if you had made the jump, you know, could you have survived and built on that? Yeah, we will never know. I can say without a doubt, if we do have to make it in one of the forthcoming seasons, we will certainly be in a better position than we would have been at the end of that season.
Yeah, and ultimately Michael left the club after a couple of years. When you look back on that 2.5 seasons or so in charge, what did you learn from his tenure?
You know, it was a difficult appointment because whoever was coming in was replacing absolute legends. All right, they'd only been with us just over 3 seasons, but what they had achieved was just incredible. And, you know, you've seen how difficult it is to replace a Sir Alex Ferguson, an Arsene Wenger. Teams battle to replace a manager that has been incredibly successful. So I think with that appointment, we at least achieved stability. We got within one game of getting promoted to the Championship. So I think Michael's appointment was a success, but maybe there was one element of it that was probably the biggest negative, and that was maybe the inability to really relate with fans that obviously Danny and Nicky were just so good at. I think Michael was the right character, maybe in a way because of that, because he was so hard to take over from legends. But I think it's something that we have looked at subsequently to far greater extent. We want an individual as our manager or head coach that can relate well with our fans.
How difficult is it in this day and age to find a manager that ticks the coaching boxes, if you like, and the head coach boxes, but also has that ability to relate to fans? Because really, if we're being honest, gone are the days of the Neil Warnocks. And obviously he's not long taken over, he's still going and he's a manager now at Aberdeen, but gone are the days of those sorts of characters overall, aren't they? And actually there tends to be a different type of management style going forward. So how difficult is it to find a head coach, a manager that can relate to fans, that puts a lot of time and effort into the community, the supporters, the away fans, whatever, but also that time on the training ground, which is so pivotal to providing a good young team that plays the right way?
Yeah, it's difficult. Every managerial appointment is difficult because you're looking for a manager at a particular point in time. The ideal person might not be available at that time, and you see it in the turnover of managers. So yeah, it's a challenge.
So Mark Kennedy comes in after Michael Appleton. What were the reasons for bringing Mark in? And I asked you about what you learned from Michael's tenure. I guess what overall did you learn? And I realised that we're really sort of being quite vague here because for time we're having to sort of cram everything in. But when you look back on that period with Mark, what did you learn yourself?
Look, I think every appointment is a learning experience. All the time we have postmortems on what happened, what did we get wrong, what can we improve in our manager select committee, which meets every couple of months. It's an ongoing process that Jez is involved in meeting candidates. And I don't think it would be right to maybe highlight exactly specific points that we've learned from each process, but without a doubt, you just try to get better and better. It doesn't mean we won't make mistakes with any of the forthcoming appointments, but I think the process is really, really improving, and we're definitely learning from it.
With that process of hiring managers, what are you looking for first and foremost? And I guess the obvious answer to that is a winner. But, we know just how rigorous, particularly the last process was of hiring a manager. When a manager comes to you, or when they're sat in front of you in essentially what is a job interview, it could be a chat, but ultimately it's an interview for the job. What are you and everyone else looking for?
All right, so we do have a checklist of what we ideally are looking for from the candidates. There will be those that will be better and tick more boxes in certain areas and less in others. But, it's putting it all together. There are times when different interviews where they've got to make presentations to us, deal with specific areas that we've asked them to come back and, present on. Some are very good at that, but they might not be so good at when it comes to actually just answering off-the-cuff questions. And it's putting together all the different feelings that you're getting from each meeting and coming to that ultimate conclusion, who's the right person for you. And as I've said, fan engagement without a doubt is out there. You want somebody that's really good on the grass. I think we definitely want somebody who's hardworking, who loves the job. It's not just that they're in it because they need to make some money to support the family. We want that manager to have passion for his job.
How often does your phone go off? And I don't mean just from people in general, but from prospective managers. Whether it's the club going through a sticky patch and managers that have maybe reached out to you in the past, or connections that you have made, or whether the club is looking for someone to replace someone else. How often do you get approached by someone saying, I think I'm the right man for the job, I think I'm the right person for this job?
Yeah, certainly around the time where you're looking for a new manager. Without a doubt, Jazz and Liam would be the ones that would be front in line in getting, calls or emails, messages from potential candidates. But yeah, I get a few at times, and where you might also get it is there's a rumor that your manager is leaving, and suddenly, it just opens up the opportunity for a potential candidate to, approach you or say, hi, I'm still in the background. And yeah, that happens a fair amount of times.
So Michael Skubala is named as head coach and is now the head coach of this football club. What impressed you about Michael's interviews, about his time, whether it was within futsal, whether it was with England, whether it was at Leeds United? What was it about Michael that really caught your eye and stood him out against other candidates?
Yeah, so I think it's the varied experience that he's had, the long experience, obviously starting off, very young, coaching, and the way he's progressed in different areas. Came up against some pretty strong candidates to get the job at Leeds, and the experiences that he had there. One of the things we also do is an exceptional amount of reference checking. And again, he ticked, all the boxes from that point of view, from whoever, we contacted to ask about Michael, came back with tremendous references. And that's not only people that might have coached with him, it's players that, he has coached as well. And again, a lot of the attributes that I've already mentioned, what we're looking for in a head coach to work at Lincoln City.
Christmas was a tricky time on the pitch, but things seem to have turned a little bit of a corner. We've got more attacking options as well. I guess this is all just part of the process, isn't it? This is part of being a football club, being a League One football club. You're going to have injuries. You're going to have times where things aren't going quite as you want them to. But as long as there's an idea that you're moving in the right direction, that's the most important thing. And I presume that's what you've seen so far.
Yeah. I was at the EPC this morning. Yeah, so for the first time was able to see, Michael talking, working with the players, but all the reports I get from Liam and Jazz, have been very positive. Absolutely, it's not, you can't just judge a manager by short-term results. Some of the best managers that English football has known have taken time to, produce the winning football that every club's fans want. Alex Ferguson, in his 4th season, they were 17th in February, 11 games without a win, lost 5-1 to Manchester City. Still can't believe that he survived that. Unfortunately, he did. And then you get, even Everton's most successful manager, Howard Kendall, 2.5 years into his reign. He had already put the nucleus of the team together that just a few months later would win the FA Cup and would go on and win the league title and the Cup Winners' Cup 16 months later. And yet at a point in December 1983, if I got the year correctly, they had gone a whole December without scoring a goal, 16th. And yet it all turned around and they went on this incredible run, just a few weeks later. And this is it. Graham Taylor, 12 games or 11 games, I think, before he got his first win at Lincoln City. So you've got to give managers time as long as you can see what's happening in the background. And I think definitely what we've seen in the last 3 games, even only one of those produced a victory, you can already see the changes that are happening and what we hope will ultimately produce a very successful team on the field. But there might be still more bumps in the road before that happens.
We've talked quite a lot about stuff on the pitch. Off it, you've been a regular voice calling for an independent regulator within football. And, for those that I guess don't know exactly what an independent regulator will entail, and I imagine that a lot of people watching and listening to this will, but could you just put forward, I guess, your viewpoint as to why you have been so vocal about it over the years?
Yeah, I think I came to the conclusion that it was necessary, especially through getting more involved in attending EFL meetings during the COVID time, because they were all on Zoom. And, physically it's hard for me to be over exactly the time that meetings do take place. So just seeing the way the game was run, how clubs interact and how they vote, was eye-opening, let's say. And without a doubt, I don't believe that whether it's Premier League clubs or EFL clubs can act totally in the best interests of the game. And you need somebody else to help push those clubs in the right direction. I don't think it's ever great to have government involvement, but I think it's absolutely necessary in this case. We would have hoped already to have had a deal from the Premier League, which would have seen greater redistribution down to the EFL. Those Premier League clubs cannot decide on how to split that additional funding that is required for the EFL. So we've had no decision on that. And it's only through the pressure of a potential independent regulator that they've even got as far as they have. Otherwise, there would have been absolutely no chance of any additional redistribution to EFL clubs.
Yeah. Richard Masters, the Premier League CEO, and Rick Parry, the EFL CEO, they met at the start of this year, or they appeared in front of a select committee. Were you maybe pleased is the wrong word, but were you satisfied with the outcome of that hearing? Do you think that we eventually will get to the point where there's enough Premier League redistribution money filtering down to the EFL leagues? And how vital is that to the EFL clubs?
Yeah, it's absolutely vital. And I think the important thing is that it won't only be redistribution of money. The other side of that, and they will come in absolutely at the same time when it does happen, is that there will have to be greater financial controls across the entire EFL. So we've got the ridiculous situation in League One and League Two is that as long as owners are prepared to put in additional money, not only through equity, even through debt funding, then a club can spend as much as it wants. Theoretically, a League One club could have a budget higher than Manchester City. Nobody's going to do that, but that's just shows the flaws in the current controls that we have.
One of the things that this club is regularly praised for is transparency when it comes to financial accounts. I know that Lincoln are often featured on Kieran Maguire's Price of Football podcast as well. He has spoken very positively about what I just said. What is the reason for being so transparent on those figures? Because certainly for us that aren't accountant or finance experts, you look at some figures and you're like, wow, how is the club even still running? How is it sustainable? Could you just give us a bit of an insight into the thinking behind that?
Yeah, look, I think it's just the belief that we have that we are custodians of the club, that ultimately, I might be around for whatever it is, 8, 10 years. It's a small blip in the 140-year history of the football club. Fans, it will be through generations, from grandparents to parents to children, and that will continue. Any person could be a fan for 60, 70, 80 years, and they deserve as much transparency in how we run the club as we can possibly give them. One thing that fans don't ideally like is undisclosed fees, but that is the way it runs at the moment. So when we have the opportunity, as in the accounts, we try to get that across, as much information as we can. I thought it was important for us to put in what our record fee paid and received was, instead of having 75k for Battersby or whoever else it is. And I just think that's what we really want to get across to fans. We'll be open as we possibly can. It's probably still not going to stop all the conspiracy theories, but we'll do our best.
There'll always be conspiracy theories. That's the way the world is now, I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Harvey Jabara's contribution should not go unnoticed either, of course, and has been a really integral part in investment to this club over the past few years, to be honest. Could you just talk to us about the relationship? We spoke with Landon Donovan on the podcast recently, who spoke glowingly about Harvey. We know that he's a family man that has fallen in love with this club and this city as well. In terms of your relationship with him, how important is that going forward, and how important is he to this club going forward?
Yeah, extremely important. I mean, it was always in our mind that myself and those that came in, post 2016 could only take the club so far, that we needed to bring in additional investment. And it was trying to keep that momentum going that Danny and Nicky had brought in their 3 years, and especially the fan base, the attendances at the LNER Stadium. Could we maintain that? And we've tried to do that as long as possible until we could bring in additional investment. And we've been quite open with that, with talks with various intermediaries. And, as you discussed on the London podcast, this Israeli agent, Raphael Geller, is actually going to be coming over for his first visit to Lincoln City and will be at the Fleetwood game. Put me in touch with Landon. I think the Everton connection counted for quite a lot when we had that first conversation. He put me in touch with Harvey. Obviously, it was during the COVID period, so we couldn't meet face to face. There were a lot of Zoom meetings before Harvey, who likes to tick every box, was convinced that we were the club to invest in. And yeah, he's, as we've disclosed in the annual report, he's now the major shareholder. And it's been absolutely vital, the funds that he's brought in, and also potentially what he could bring into the future and future connections as well.
And the United States is a big part of that as well. We know that there's a World Cup on the horizon. How integral is it to build those connections with the States? Because we've seen it, whether you want to use Wrexham as the example, whether you want to use Tom Brady taking over at Birmingham City or becoming a major director at Birmingham City as the example, whichever way you want to look at it, the United States has so often proved to be a important connection, obviously a big network to have there as well. But could you just give us a bit of a reasoning behind that?
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a place where probably 90% of capital coming into the English game is coming from. Certainly the interest is at an absolute high. Obviously, we don't quite have the publicity that Brady or Ryan Reynolds would bring to a club, but with San Diego Loyal, we were making some input into that market, and at least creating some interest there. It's an ongoing challenge for us, and something that we will continue to look at, how we can make that more meaningful for ourselves going forward.
Final point, Clive, because you've been very generous with your time. We've covered a heck of a lot over this first ever 2-part We Are Imps podcast as well. Stacey West redevelopment, is it ticking along as you hoped it would? And, has your mindset with regards to a stadium changed at all? Because I imagine it's something, and I know it's not something that we've ever discussed, but I imagine it's something that you've wrestled with over the years, the idea of a new stadium. I know it's been talked about at recent over the years, fans forums too. So where does the Stacey West redevelopment and the idea of a new stadium somewhere in the future align?
Well, when I first got involved with the club, it certainly seemed as if a potential move to a new stadium was on the horizon. I would say at the moment that's not the case. I don't believe it will happen in my lifetime. So everything is about trying to make the LNER Stadium as good as we possibly can. Stacey West development is part of that. Obviously, it's going to be fantastic for the foundation, but it's also brought a lot of benefits. The money that we're saving on water, the improvement in irrigation, the improvement in power, networking, a whole lot of things, have been improved. There'll be additional toilet facilities. And obviously, as we've mentioned, also the potential to increase the capacity of the Stacey West stand through standing in that stand. That could also add potentially 600 to 700 seats. And we're continually looking at what we could do in the rest of the stadium. I think a big part, and going back to potential redistribution from the Premier League and greater controls, if that happens, it allows potentially money to be targeted at areas that can improve things, that can make the fan experience a lot better, can improve returns for the club. So, we just got to hope that in the near term we do get some resolution of that Premier League redistribution. And that would be, a really big positive for what we can do to improve the stadium and even make ourselves more competitive.
Yeah, fingers crossed indeed. Clive, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on this two-part We Are Imps podcast. You'll be heading back to South Africa soon. Are you a podcast man in terms of the flight, reading books, watching films, or just getting a bit of shut-eye?
Seeing that South Africa to London flights are at night, I generally try and get a bit of sleep, or otherwise I read. So no, I don't watch movies or podcasts or anything like that. It's sleeping or reading.
I like it. Well, safe flight indeed. Clive, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sam.